I'll give you two controversial ones. Ocean's 11 was better than the original. The original was Frank Sinatra and stuff. If you ever watched the original, it's a little cheesy. The Ocean's 11 with what's his name is great. And then, this is going to make a lot of people mad, True Grit. The remake was better than the original with John Wayne. Yeah, see, I told you it was it's controversial. I got someone who does not agree with me there. Yeah? Yeah? And you guys have any that you think are any remakes that are better than the original? Godzilla. You know what? If you put in the one that came out in Japan just recently, that Godzilla is awesome. And they did it like on a shoestring budget. I think it was like $4 million they made that movie for. It's crazy. But I would agree with you there. The new Godzilla movies are pretty decent. Anybody else? A remake better than the original? The Parent Trap? Which one? Oh, yeah, with no, that's not bad. That's a good one. I can give you a ton of ones where the remakes are not better, right? That's usually the norm. That usually, like in fact, in almost every one of these, the new one's not as good as the original. But this is a really cool idea here, and I just might put it past you that I think that there's going to be some repeating going on, and it shows the difference between God and us, that when Jesus repeats himself, it makes everything better, not worse. And there's going to be a moment for us to think about that at the end of the Bible study, repeating, remaking, recreating. So if that's the case, if what Jesus does today, he makes the originals better and the new ones better, what's the new heavens and new earth going to be like? That's a thought we'll talk about at the very end. Okay, so we're headed in. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 5. This is going to be a little setup. I'll go through it fairly quick, the setup, but we need to read the first ones here. Now, there's something really interesting that Jesus, when he does the first, and when I say first, I mean chronologically first. So before this fish multiplication story is the first one in Luke 5, okay? And the thing that's really interesting as well is, what is the fish multiplication narrative part of? And look at the heading of the section, Luke 5, 1 through 11. Jesus calling his disciples. So this is like he's calling Peter into ministry. Is caught up in this multiplication of fish. So I don't think this is by accident that all these things kind of connect. Okay? Let's take a look at the text then. Luke 5, 1 through 11. On one occasion while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and the nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. So when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. Okay, so night fishing was unusually successful, or was usually successful, but this night had been a failure. Jesus tells them to put out again in the deep water. Now, it's interesting that Peter does that. Who knows more about fishing in their lives? Peter is a professional fisherman. Jesus is, as far as we know, a carpenter, but he hasn't done a lot of carpentry, right? So who knows about fishing? Peter does, but he relents, right? But at your word, I will let down the nets. That's really cool, that phrasing. I think it's intentional as well. The word of Christ created the heavens and the earth. The word of Christ did all sorts of miraculous things. Why can't it convince Peter to do something normally he wouldn't even think about doing? Go ahead. At this time of day, it would be warm. So the fish would have retreated to deeper parts of the lake, but it wouldn't have, no one would be fishing this time of day. They'd fish at twilight, they'd fish in the evening. They don't fish during the day because deep fishing is usually completely worth. See, in the latter text, when we get into the John text, there's like the thought that Jesus might be spotting. Apparently it was a thing where a fisherman would stand on shore and he would actually watch for signs of fish schools moving and then tell the boats to go there and fish there, right? But fishing in deep water, where are you going to see the schools moving? They're deep, right? So this is a total God thing. Like, your chances of hitting fish when they're in the deep water is low, and at this time of day you just don't fish. So it is very much a miraculous kind of thing. But at the same time, like, you're right. Deep water probably would have been where the fish were, but at the same time, like, they would have probably maybe seen Jesus as not take him seriously because nobody fishes at this time of day. Which is why, what are they doing? If fishermen fished during this time of day, what would they be doing? They'd be fishing. But instead, where are they? They're on the shore, they're getting their nets out to fix, and they're doing like work that they need to do to prepare for the next bout of fishing, right? So the trained fishermen know, this is not when you fish. But Jesus is like, hey buddy, I created the fish. I know where they're at. It's okay. Yeah? So they do, and they have great success. Miraculous success, in fact. Jesus does this gracious miracle. Peter reacts with fear and trembling and shame. Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord. Jesus has an answer. Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching men. This is a really important setup, right? We're just going to kind of log this away as we go forward into today's actual lesson. By the way, just clarification, we have been focusing on post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. That's what we're going to look at today. This is just set up for that. John 21 is where we're going to spend most of our time. Okay? So, this is our story thus far. Now we get into another setup time. Go with me to John 18. You guys know this very well. This is one of the sections of Scripture we probably know the best because during Lenten time we read it every single year. You guys have heard this. I mean, those of you who are like 50 or 60, you probably heard this in excess, read out loud, not even considering your own personal study, but just the times it's been read in church, probably 100 times, at least, right? So we know these sections very well. That's why I just cherry-picked. I didn't read the whole thing. We'll read this here. So this is John 18, the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, you also are not one of this man's disciples, are you? He said, I'm not. Ugh, Peter, right? I think I had it in there. I think I have it down. Yeah. Now Simon Peter was standing, warming himself by the fire, so they said to him, you also are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it, said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter again denied it, and at once the rooster crowed. Not exactly the same Peter from Matthew 26, 33 to 35. This is shortly before the betrayal and arrest in the Gospel of Matthew. What does Peter say? Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. I think they all followed Peter's lead because Peter says it. But Peter is the guy who is the impulsive, passionate one. I mean, he doesn't think, I want to point this out to you, that Peter jumps out of a perfectly good boat, not once, but twice, as a fisherman, right? Like, I don't know if you know anything about, the fisherman that I knew, my grandpa Chun was an avid fisherman, and so we would go out in the boat, it'd get really hot fishing, and all the kids, like, it was me and my sister and little brother, little sister, little brother, we'd all be like, Grandpa, can we go swimming? And he's just like, what are you talking about? We're out here fishing. We don't go swimming off the boat. We're fishing, right? I don't know a lot of fishermen who are just like, change on a dime, and they're like, all right, we're going swimming now. Doesn't happen, right? Fishermen don't jump out of perfectly good boats to go swimming. Peter does it twice. He's a passionate, crazy dude, which is pretty awesome, really, when you get down to it. So sometimes I think his mouth writes checks his body can't cash, or his faith can't cash. It's just kind of who he is. But eventually, he will develop the kind of faith and strength, I think, from the gift of the Holy Spirit, where finally his faith and work can actually cash the checks that his mouth writes. He becomes someone that is trustworthy, but not at first. So we have these two things in the background of John 21 today, okay? I'm just reading those to prepare ourselves for the lesson. John 21. Okay, let's open up to John 21, shall we? John 21, starting with the first, I think that's just the first few verses here. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and revealed himself in this way. So look at verse 1. This is just an introduction to the section, right? This is what happened. Verse 2. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. Why do you think they go fishing? Anybody? This is kind of a cool thing I want to point out. Why do you think they go fishing? I mean, Peter and the other apostles, they went out with the 72, they went out and preached the gospel. They've been doing ministry now for a solid 2 years. That first year they probably weren't doing a lot of outward stuff, but then they've been doing a different job for 3 years. Why go back to fishing? What's that? Maybe. To get away, to recharge, sure. How many of you watch the NFL at all? Okay, Pastor's like, yes, I do. How many of you ever seen a really good defensive coach, right? He coaches defense on an NFL team, and then they say, he's really, really good. We're going to make him what? A head coach. And then he works as a head coach for a couple years, and what happens? He stinks on ice. So what does he do after he gets fired for being a terrible head coach? He goes back to being a defensive coach because that's what he knows how to do, right? So what's Peter gone through? I mean, Jesus has said, peace be to you. He's revealed himself to them. At one point, he ate bread with them in the Gospel of Luke. All the events post-resurrection that Christ has done with them. But Peter and Jesus really haven't had a good conversation yet. So let's think about where Peter was left on the night of the crucifixion. Peter goes home and he weeps bitterly. Why? We just read it. Betrayed the Lord 3 times. And for all of his bluster, again in Matthew, right? Peter failed miserably. Anybody ever failed in a very, very public way? Ever had that happen to you? You know what? It doesn't happen very often. I had a friend who was a pastor, and what happened was that you ever had a brain fart where you read a word that's not there? So you know where this is going. So he's reading a gospel lesson, and he accidentally flips a word, and he reads it, and it was like not a good word, and it came up in the middle of the reading, and it was like he could do no right with that congregation after that moment, and everything fell apart. And eventually he took a call and went somewhere else. Everything just spiraled and fell apart. Nothing could change, right? It just was what it was. A very important day, he was very I think it was Easter Sunday. He was very nervous, and one short little mistake, everything fell apart. You have this kind of mistake, and I don't know how you ever go forward in life. That's where Peter is, right? So even though Jesus has been kind to him, and he said nice things to him, and he showed himself to him in the resurrection, he's still sitting in this life or this situation of brokenness, of abject failure. He'll never be the thing he thought he would be. I don't know if he has dreams about being a powerful apostle, but that's gone, right? At least in his mind. He will never be the thing he was supposed to be, ever. That's where we're at, at this moment. So what does Peter do? When you failed at everything you wanted to try, what do? You go back to what you know how to do. Because at least you can go out and do this thing and feel like you know how to do something. Right? And when I start failing on a regular basis, I go back to music because at least I know I can do that. And I can do it well. It's easy. I fall back into it like falling off a log. But it's not good for me. It's not the primary amount of the things that I do here. Yeah? He goes fishing because it's what's normal to him. And for the rest of them, I'd imagine. Night fishing was usually successful, but this night had been a failure. So things are kind of lining up like they did before. Jesus tells them to put out again in the deep water. Why don't they recognize him? There's a bunch of answers, so you guys can just give one if you like. Why don't they recognize him? There's some people who think, I've read some scholars who think it was probably, in the morning and it was probably cool. There might have been kind of semi-fog going on and they were off a little bit from shore. So they literally just couldn't see him. They just knew there's some guy standing on the shore and he's talking to them, so that might be one reason why. But then we just read this account not too long ago in church, the road to Emmaus, Jesus purposely keeps himself hidden from the disciples so that he can do something really miraculous. So it could be that. It could be they couldn't hear him. And it could be that it's still dark enough where they can't see him. Who knows? But they don't recognize Jesus. Let's read a little. I don't think we read very far, so we just read to the "We will go with you." So verse 4, just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. Okay. So why does Jesus call them children and not something else? There's not a lot. Oh, go ahead.
Trying to tell us who he is. They're obviously older men in the boat, right? So it's describing you are my children.
Okay, so it's a term of endearment. Yeah. Okay, fun. I like that. Yeah. There are some people that I read in some of the commentaries that said this would be almost a reference guys, or hey guys, so it's just kind of a throwaway term, just meaning you subset of people out on the boat. It could be that too. But of course, St. Augustine, he goes on a deep dive on this. And if you ever read St. Augustine, when he interprets parables, he interprets every single part of the parable, and some of the interpretations are just bonkers. They make no sense, but they want to make every part of the thing be important or meaningful, right? So St. Augustine goes so far as to say that it's a children thing, they are the children of God, and it's this whole long thing. I don't know about that. That seems a little deep, but so Jesus called them children, nothing else. I think he calls them children so he doesn't give it away. Maybe he calls them brothers or disciples or something else. It'll be obvious, so he calls them this term children so they don't recognize who he is. Jesus might be acting as a spotter here, so maybe the reason why they're taking his advice is because, like I said, it was common for people to stand on the shore and then point to where they think groups of fish are swimming, right? So that's maybe why they're listening to him at all. Who knows? It is weird that some random person on the shore is yelling at the fishermen directions and they're following them, but oh shoot, I didn't plug in the microphone. God darn it. Give me a second. I gotta find the thing here. Okay, I'll try it again.
Very familiar about all this. Something very familiar about all this.
Okay, that's we're going on. So, obviously these things are meant to be very similar to what happened in Luke 5. Then we get on to verse 7 and following. That disciple whom Jesus loved, that would be John. If you're wondering who the disciple whom Jesus loved. John's weird, right? He calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved. He says he's the faster disciple who outran Peter to the tomb. John's just does some fun things in his gospel. I don't know why. I think of all the... What's that? John was on the spectrum? Maybe, I don't know. John, I think of all the gospel writers, John's the one I'm going to want to talk to the most because he's funny. He likes to insert himself into the gospel. So yeah. So Jesus, the disciple whom Jesus loved, says what? It is the Lord. So we've gone from what? In the Luke 5 lesson, Peter calls him Master, not Lord. Now John calls him Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. I read through the Greek and said he was like naked. I think what they mean is he would probably have been wearing like underwear, their version of underwear probably, but that he was naked except for everything else but that. So that would have been kind of a weird way to swim in water and then see your Lord. So you put on your outer garment. But those of us who have ever jumped off a boat into water also know, like, you don't put on a bunch of clothes before you get into the water. That's recipe for disaster, you know. But no, Peter does. He puts on his outer garment because he's in his underwear, fishing, right? And threw himself in the sea. And I did look up this Greek. I thought maybe it was something more nuanced than that. It is not. It is ekbalo, which is literally the word they use when they throw a stone, right? Peter just launches himself into the sea. And the thing I thought about here was, as soon as Peter hears it is the Lord, I don't know if you've ever had this thought before. Do you think Peter launched himself out of the boat because he thought he was going to walk on water again? The thought just occurred to me this morning when I was kind of like, I wonder, because it's such a weird, how many of you have ever had someone, this drives me crazy, you get someone behind you, and they're honking their horn for you to speed up, right? And then they zoom around you, and they end up at the same red light that you're at, and you're like, all right, pal, you got what you wanted. We're all here at the same time. Peter does this. He jumps out of the boat, and the Bible tells it pretty clearly they get to the shore about the same time. So it was like, what were you thinking, man? You didn't get there any faster. You could have stayed in the boat, stayed dry, and got there at the same time. And that's what makes me wonder if, like, once he hears it's the Lord, did he think he'd jump out in the water and run to shore? I don't know. That's very speculative. Please, it's not in the Bible, but it's the thought that occurred to me. Like, otherwise, why do you launch yourself into the water unless you're just a crazy person? Which maybe that's what it is. You know, like, I guess I'm so excited, I'll just swim. Whatever. Okay. So, put on his outer garment, for he stripped for work, threw himself in the sea. The other disciples came to the boat, dragged the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. Okay. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard, hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. So there's some interesting little bits and pieces here. Full of large fish is a big deal, right? Because you go fishing on Sea of Galilee, you might get a net full, but you're not going to get all large fish, right? You can get medium size, small size, not big ones. Those of you who are fishermen, what are better things to have? Really small fish or really big fish? Yeah, you want big. They're easier to clean. They're easier to take the fish off of. Although when I was in China, I saw the weirdest thing. They would be like in small ponds, and they would be fishing for little fish. And what they would do is they would basically cook the whole thing, and then they would just chew the meat off the bones, which is a weird thing. Like, because when I was a translator and I were walking down, we saw this guy doing this. He's eating, like, the fish was like literally this big, and he's eating the meat off the bones. I was like, what's he doing? He's like, that's great. We love it. It's like, I'm telling you, where I come from in Minnesota, that's bait, my friend. We don't even, that fish is not, and I've been very charitable with my children when they've fished for panfish when I was younger, right? And as I've gotten older, I'm like, if it's not bigger than my palm, it's going back in the water. I'm not cleaning that stupid thing. I'm going to get like 2 bites of fish off a fish. It's going to take me half an hour to clean. No, thank you. So it's a big deal that they're full of not just fish or small fish or medium fish, large fish. It's a net full of large fish. It's a lot of money. It's worth a lot, right? So it's big riches. It's a wonderful gift. And then also just a quick question. Jesus is already cooking fish. Why would you go get a fish from the boat? Every fisherman knows why. Is there nothing better than like when you're out on a fishing trip and you come in and you clean some fish and you eat it like as soon as you get them clean? That is the best tasting fish ever. right? So I think that's the only reason Jesus asked them to bring some of the fish, because it's fresh. It's going to taste wonderful, right? Okay. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything deeper in it than that. 153 of them. I've heard like 1,000 different answers for why the number in here is specific 153. In my opinion, I think it's in there just because it's big. You have 153 big fish inside a net. It just means that the harvest is overwhelming. It's a big catch. You can read into the 153 if you want, but I don't know if it's really worth your time. Okay. Jesus said, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" By the way, any of the fishermen here have fish for breakfast? Yeah, I'm sure you've gone like, I know if you go up to like a Canada trip, right, it's almost always having fish in the morning. But it's not terribly normal in the rest of the world, you know. But it is very much, if you ever go on a trip to Israel, every morning they'll have smoked salmon in the breakfast buffet, every morning. And I had fish in the morning pretty regularly. It's a Mediterranean diet. They have a lot of fish. They eat it in the morning. It's weird for us. I was looking for the Captain Crunch. Where's Captain Crunch? Same thing with China. When I was in China, they never had cereal. They never had milk, right? So I could never have cereal in the morning. It was a rough month and a half. I had to eat. What they would give you was these like big hunks of bologna. They're about this big and about a quarter-inch thick. And then you'd get hard-boiled eggs sometimes. And then they had this long pieces of dough. They were kind of like a donut, but they weren't sweet. And then you'd dip them in tofu sauce. Yeah, breakfast was hard. Breakfast is hard. I used to make sandwiches a lot I take the bread dough and I'd put a piece of egg on it and then a piece of that bologna, another piece of bread, and then I'd have a breakfast sandwich. But it was not good. It was not good. Okay. I'm blathering at this point. Let's go on. Now none of the disciples, I'm on verse 12, none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord because they're standing in proximity. They can see him. They know, right? Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Again, I don't know about you, but Jesus feeding them bread and fish.
Something very familiar about all this.
Okay. Is the bread and fish a commentary on like communion? I don't think so. I think Jesus is just feeding them. Don't read into communion there. It's just him feeding them. But it is a sense of, what does Jesus do? He provides for us. He gives us all sorts of things. We could start making a list of those things, and then we could say, well, he provides here, he provides there. They're not necessarily the same things, but this is what Christ does. He provides for his church. Yeah. The one that always jumps in my mind of Christ's provision is the wedding in Cana, right? He makes wine, wonderful wine for a wedding. Okay, so this picture's not showing up terribly well. I'm sorry. It's a really pretty picture. It's probably because the sun's in the background. So this is called Tagba. This is where we believe Jesus recommissioned Peter as the apostle. I kind of gave away, but whatever. Beautiful little place down by the Sea of Galilee. If off to your left, there's a little church there. That's nice. And then they have a little outdoor amphitheater as well, where a lot of church groups, when they go through, they'll stop and have worship or communion. Yeah? So it's a really cool place. Really beautiful. There's like little streams that run down to the Sea of Galilee here, and it's nice. Nice place. This is also, you'll get a kick out of this. You see the figure right there in the back there? Oh, shoot, where'd my little thing go? Here we go. Right here. It's one of the only times I caught Michael Brown in a picture. He was a friend I traveled with. He hated taking pictures. He would always take them, and every time I tried to take a picture of him, he would run. Right? It's the only time I ever caught him in a picture. He's down by the seashore, and I caught him. And he was mad about it later, too. Okay. So going on then, chapter 21, verse 20. Let's see. No, where am I at here? Now I lost my place. Oh, yeah, okay. 15, sorry, 15. So you want to follow along with chapter 20, verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Who's he referring to? Well, he says these. Who's he referring to? The other disciples, the other apostles. Do you love me more than the rest of these guys? Which Peter has said at one, remember back in Matthew, he's like, if everyone else abandons you, I will never betray you, right? So he's already kind of said he likes them more, he loves them more. And Peter has done more extensive miracles and things than the other disciples have. So there's some probably, and especially after Pentecost, there could be some proof to support that maybe Peter does love or have a stronger faith than the rest of the disciples. But do you love me more than these? And then we get into this really weird interchange where Jesus is doing something. It's hard to make sense of it. So we have two words, agapo, to love chiefly of the heart, wholehearted, unconditional, devoted. Agape love is usually is only for kind of love of God for man and man for God. It's like it's kind of the highest level of the Greek loves. Agape is the highest. So Jesus is saying, do you love me? He's saying agape, right? But phileo is brotherly love, to be a friend, fond of, have affection for, right? So this is the love that Peter responds with, which is really weird, right? Jesus says, do you agape me? Peter says, yes, I phileo you, right? It's very weird. So we have this go on. Do you agape me the first time? Yes, I phileo. Jesus says, feed my lambs. Do you agape me? Yes, I phileo, tend my sheep. And the third time then, Jesus comes down to Peter, almost incarnationally. He realizes for whatever reason, whatever's going on in Peter's life, he can't say the word agape, right? So instead, Jesus says, do you phileos me? And Peter says, yes, I phileo you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep, right? You're no longer a fisherman, you're a shepherd. And your job is to feed my sheep. Okay? Now, if we look at the text, I think I have it again here too. What is this doing here? Let's do it one more time.
Something very familiar about all this.
Okay. So, what is Jesus doing here? Anyone have a guess? Yeah. He denied him 3 times, so Jesus asked Peter, do you love me 3 times? Which is why the third time, I think for 2 reasons, that Jesus comes down to his level and says, do you phileo me? And also the third time being how he betrayed him, right? So we see this, where is it? Verse 17. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said it the third time. Again, for probably multiple reasons. Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Okay. So I think Jesus is trying to put Peter back in right relationship to him and to allow him to be not only an apostle, but the apostle going forward. Make no mistake, when Paul is getting into trouble, who does Paul have to contend with? Who does Paul have to kind of get on his side to make sure that we agree that what Paul's doing is good? Peter. Who's in charge? Peter is. He will be forever. He's kind of the chief dude in charge. So even Paul has to kind of, now Paul says, hey, listen, this is what I've been doing. We've been preaching to the Gentiles. Good things are happening. And Peter realizes, well, I screwed up. I should have been supporting you, right? And they kind of come together. But Paul can't just assert and say, I'm right, I'm the number one guy. No, he's got to actually convince Peter, because Peter is the one, on this rock I will build my church, right? So, here we go. That's not, by the way, I didn't mean that in the Catholic sense. I just mean Peter's confession. It's important. Okay. I won't make you listen to it again.
Very familiar about all this.
Okay. So how does Peter die? How is he martyred? Anyone remember? I'll give you a picture of it. He was crucified upside down. It's not in the Bible, but we know this from extra biblical sources, that when they want to crucify him, he asks, no, I want to be crucified upside down because I don't want to be associated. I don't want to kind of take that office or be held up like Christ. I'm not him. So he assumes. St. Andrew does a similar thing, but instead of being crucified on a cross, St. Andrew is crucified on a they turn the cross on its side and he's crucified on an X. That's why that shows up in all the Scottish flags and stuff, right? So it's not uncommon for what happened. Peter is crucified. By the way, this is why some people get really caught up in how the Pope is the Antichrist, because he has this upside down crucifix on the big pontiff cap. But the reason why is because he sits in the office of St. Peter. And so that's the signature of St. Peter, an upside down crucifix. So it happens exactly like Jesus says it will. He dies, he's led where he didn't want to go, he's taken by chains into that situation, and then he's crucified. Really interesting, by the way, in the last verse here of 19, and after saying this, he said, follow me. I did look, and the follow is an imperative. This is a command word. So I think what happens is, it's kind of like, how many of you have ever had like a really good fight with your kids, right? And then finally you manage to work your way through it, and you're crying, and they're crying, and we're all crying, and we're all like, okay, we're sorry, we're all saying we're sorry, we're all getting better, everything's going fine. And then what happens at the end? Parents say, okay, we're moving forward now. This is over. We're done with this, we're going forward now. And I think that's what Jesus is saying. You know what? You're my guy. Okay? Follow me. We're going forward now. We're going out. And that's exactly what Peter does. The Spirit comes on Pentecost, and the preaching of Peter is amazing. And everything he does after that is amazing as well, right? So they put it behind them, and they move forward in their relationship. So I really love this lesson from John, because it is this like, these stories are meant for repeating, right? They keep coming up, and what Jesus does is, he makes the second version of the story better than the first, and it actually makes the first one better too, in both ways, right? He turns around Peter's betrayal. He turns around the first miracle of fish, and he makes both those stories better because how they are multiplied and ended. Yeah? So if Christ can do that with Peter's betrayal, if Christ can do that with the miraculous first catch of fish, what can he do with this creation that he made? Right? He was there at creation at the beginning. Everything's being created through his word. Is creation going to be better than it was not only now, but at the beginning? And my opinion is, yes. The new heavens and the new earth are going to be better than the first go-around. And that might be controversial, but everything Jesus does makes me think that that's what's going to happen. Because that's what he does with stuff. This second story is better than the first one, and it makes the first one better. The miraculous catching of fish. I love this story. It makes me happy. It also reminds me about my dad. If you ever got to know my dad, as he's gotten older, he's like forgotten a lot of things. Now he's kind of getting some memory issues. He tells the same like 9 or 10 stories every time you see him. And every time he tells a story, they get bigger and grander and more ridiculous. Every time he tells them, they get crazier. And so there's just something about it. I love sitting at his feet and listening to those silly old stories of high school in Ada, Minnesota. So anyway, these readings speak to me. Does anyone have any questions or any thoughts, any comments about any of this stuff? Anybody? Well, I hope it was edifying for you this morning. Why don't we close with the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Something very familiar about all